I'm back with Michael Young, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins. Welcome. We've been talking about this episode for a while. Michael and I are constantly texting one another nonstop about the culture and the wars, the culture wars. And he's somebody that I often turn to for just insight or his thoughts on something or how something works, because you are somebody who has deeply studied all of the literature and a lot of the stuff behind the critical race theory and the very confusing commie gobbledygook that seems to have infected kind of every aspect of our life as we know it. And before we get into that, we're going to talk about Beautiful Trouble, which is this kind of hand toolbox for the revolution that he and I have been talking about, that is very available to anyone to go read. But before that, we never talked about this the last time you were on. Is that where Woko Distance came from? So you're known as Woko Distance on X, formerly Twitter. Everybody should follow him there. He's one of my favorites. And where did that name come from? We never really discussed that.
Oh, the name Woko Distance is a portmanteau of the words woke and social distance. And yeah, I was tying two things together there. And my original handle, I don't think I was the first one to do this, but I got read, a thread of mine before I was Woko Distance was read, and at the time I was calling myself Woko Harambe. Now, I wasn't the first guy, I don't think, to use that name, because there was another Woko Harambe that was quite well known. Somebody else.
Okay.
So I wasn't the first Woko Harambe, I don't think. There was a guy who had an avatar of a mug like this, and he called himself, and I'm not him, but so I called myself Woko Harambe, and it was my tagline was, "I can't shut up because silence is complicity." And I did a thread on Beautiful Trouble, and it got read on Ben Shapiro's show.
And this was what year?
Well, I think this was 2018. And this was the year. So I was working at I'll give the province I live in away now. I was working for the government of Saskatchewan at the time.
Okay.
I was a ministerial assistant, and they had to change the social media policy.
Oh, right. You did talk about this on our last one.
And they're just like, you can't go viral, or the premier has to answer for us. I'm sorry. You can't get read on Ben Shapiro's show. I'm like, but I'm right about this. And they're like, yes, we know you are. The chief advisor to our opposition wrote Beautiful Trouble. So I have some experience. So tell us about
Beautiful Trouble.
Okay. So that's the genesis of Woko Distance. And then I started writing about this because there were basically three areas which I have sort of unique experiences which allow me to comment on in ways which are important and I think helpful for people. The first is that I understand postmodernism, because philosophical postmodernism was very focused on language and on texts and on interpretation. And I was getting a degree in biblical studies. And at that time, a number of people were saying, hey, look, this postmodernism stuff allows for new biblical interpretations. And you could see how that might cause a bit of a stir in biblical studies, right? So I was aware of the postmodernism. Then I went in and I started working in philosophy, and I became very quickly aware that there was all of this mode of intellectual engagement, which came loaded with left-wing assumptions and value judgments. And I discovered that was critical theory. And once I had those kind of two things down, I read this book, which is The Rebel Cell by Joseph. It's The Rebel Cell by Joseph Heath and Andrew Potter. And that book is going to tie really heavily into this book, because The Rebel Cell basically explained the underlying cultural and ideological milieu that gave rise to this sort of protest movement, this long-standing protest movement we've seen since the 60s, this radical revolutionary cultural movement that's been going on the political left. And the rebel cell is kind of the skeleton key for that. And Beautiful Trouble is the manual, which is the highest expression of those tactics, explained for people who want to use them.
So how is this different from like Saul Alinsky?
Oh, yes. Alinsky is actually mentioned in Beautiful Trouble. Alinsky was an organizer. And Alinsky wrote Rules for Radicals. Mm-hmm. But Rules for Radicals was written in the 60s.
Okay.
And
yeah, because even Obama talked about Rules for Radicals.
Yes. It says, choose tactics that support your strategy, right here. And when it says for further insight, up in the corner, that's Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. So Alinsky was sort of a forerunner to this.
Okay. So this is like a modernized Rules for Radicals.
Well, it's different because when Alinsky did Rules for Radicals, Alinsky was putting forth a proto version of it, right? So comparing Beautiful Trouble to Alinsky is a little bit like comparing a Lamborghini to the Ford Model T, right? They're both cars, but the Lamborghini has a whole bunch of extra stuff that comes loaded with it.
Okay.
Today, Alinsky is kind of seen to be a little bit outdated. Some of his principles and his ideas have kind of hung around, but for the most part, we've moved past him in terms of the tactics and things that we're adopting. Because remember, he got going in the 50s and 60s, and he was focused on, hard material power. There's been a shift on the left from material power to cultural power. Right. And the synthesis of those two things and the interplay of those two things. And that's where Beautiful Trouble is. And Beautiful Trouble also has the benefit of like 40 years of case studies, of protests, of deep knowledge that they can draw on. And because of that, it's significantly more sophisticated in its tactical application and its strategic sort of its tactical and strategic thinking is far more sophisticated than what Alinsky had. Alinsky was kind of a cynical realpolitik guy, institutions don't hurt, but people do, right? Whereas Beautiful Trouble is far more concerned with there are ways of capturing the narrative without looking like you're trying to capture the narrative.
Oh, interesting.
Right? It's far more
self-aware.
Sophisticated. It's not only is it self-aware, but it's meta self-aware. So they're
who wrote
not.
This?
This was.
It was multiple writers, right?
So, the co-editor and wrangler-in-chief is Andrew Boyd. Okay. The second co-editor is Dave Oswald Mitchell. And then each of the sections is written by various activists with expertise in various areas. So what they did is Beautiful Trouble was an attempt to centralize all of the best ideas, tactics, strategies, and principles of the very best radical leftist activists into one manual so they could disseminate those tactics and replicate their activist success across multiple domains. Okay. That's the goal. Okay. And the press that made this book is absolutely radical. It's as or more radical than Haymarket Books, if you know what Haymarket Books is. So it's very important to understand that this stuff didn't emerge sort of incidentally. It's
for people who don't know, will you just tell them what Haymarket Books is?
Haymarket Books is a radical press that produces literature that's so far left that it would make Bernie Sanders blush. So when you say Haymarket Books, this is books on police abolition, books on the end of capitalism would be one, would be another topic. I'm just going to pull up some books by Haymarket Books so you can see. Healing Justice and Our Call to Practice. Henry Haywood has a book called Negro Liberation, How We Get Free, the social basis of the female question, Understanding Capitalism by Richard Wolff, Understanding Marxism by Richard Wolff.
Okay.
There are no neutrals here. U.S. labor, Zionism, and the struggle for Palestine. That's the kind of book that you're looking at when you're talking Haymarket books.
Okay.
This one is published through OR, which is every bit as radical. And so, people need to understand that these people are not just doing this stuff. They're very, very aware of the tradition out of which they come, the social location that they're in, and the perception of their tactics, and the way that their tactics move, not just the Overton window, but the very constitution of discourse itself. So they're doing their analysis at nearly every level, and they reflect back on themselves sometimes. And they turn their own tools toward themselves and say, are we radical enough? And they'll critique themselves.
Okay, interesting. Who are they? Who are the people? Like, who uses this handbook? I mean, other than, like, something that's really interested me a lot in this whole moment is the awareness that they are extremely organized. We saw this during the Minnesota protests and the ICE stuff and all the stuff that was going on that was crazy. And what's always amazed me is that this stuff can seem to be turned on and off like a faucet. It will be like all of a sudden there will be activism in some area or many areas that looks very similar, and it will be almost omnipresent. You can't get away from it, and then it will evaporate as soon as it was there. And when we saw, these signal chats that people were in, where they were following the ICE people and they had these databases, who is organizing this stuff? First of all, my second question would be, who's funding it?
Well, okay, so there's a lot there. So I think
because there seems to be like street commies who just are like the thugs, like they just are like the marching. It feels like they're activated and they're part of these organizations, but they're not the organizers. And and then there's kind of the academics and the elites who partake in this from a very far away distance and don't seem to care at all that their street commies might get a little bit out of hand or do violence or get killed. Like, there just does not seem to be they have no problem saying the right is radicalized in this way, X way, that way, and that people are, hearing this language, but they completely distance themselves from that happening on their side and take no responsibility if they agitate for people to go out and burn down cities as, a senator or a vice president. And then if something goes amiss, they're like, oh, that was just a citizen who was getting angry. But then you find out that citizen was part of this group that was through some school. And then explain to me how it seems so organic and yet organized at the same time.
So
we can talk about.
yeah. Unironically, yes. Completely unironically, that's right. It will be in the handbook. So there's a bunch of these books. So one of them is Eric Mann, Playbook for Progressives, The 16 Qualities of the Successful Organizer. That's one of them. Direct Action by L.A. Kaufman, Protest and the Reinvention of American Radicalism is another. Roots to Power by Lee Staples is another one. No Shortcuts, Organizing for Power in the New Gilded Age by Jane F. McLively is another one. There's a lot of these manuals. And there's little hints as to who gets what or who gets what from where. So you talked about, do you know who Cloward-Piven are?
No.
So Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven were organizers in sort of the Alinsky era. And what they wanted to do, it's more complicated than this, but they wanted to, it's called the Cloward-Piven strategy. I'll just pull something up here. And the goal was to create a situation to end poverty by overwhelming the welfare system. Mm-hmm. And the goal was to overwhelm it to the point where it collapsed and would force the government into adopting something like a universal guaranteed income for everyone. That was their goal. So they wanted to sign up as many people as they could. Okay.
And so now AI is going to do that.
The goal was to trigger a crisis.
Right.
That was the point. Right? The goal wasn't to help people by giving them welfare. The goal is to overwhelm the welfare system and to collapse it. So off the hop, I want you to take a look at something here, because this move is missed. They're no longer attempting to argue with you and debate you on the merits of the position. They're moving up out of the system and challenging the system using tools and methods that are not meant to function within the system. Because remember, the way the system is supposed to function is that we do this through representatives and through debate and through democracy, right? Mm-hmm. They're trying to take that system and break it. So they don't recognize its legitimacy. So they do things and they use tools which are outside what we typically think of as legitimate ways of doing democracy. Right? So their goal is not to engage with you on the substance. The goal is to force a crisis through action. Okay. That's the first thing. We're not arguing with you. We're trying to break your system by force, by signing up so many people that it collapses, and then you'll have to give us what we want. It's not about arguing. We're not debating about who's right. To quote Marx, philosophers have already interpreted the world. The point is to change it. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's what we're doing. So when you look at Lee Staples' book, Roots to Power, the foreword to that book is written by Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. Okay? So all of these people, this is its own political tradition.
Right.
And it has its own logic and its own way of thinking. Okay? And you cannot understand it if you don't accept that fact.
Okay.
It can't be argued with necessarily. Because the point is not to argue, the point is to create social change. So any argument, and we'll talk about this and I'll show you this in a second, any argument they have is only being started with you because they think that the argument can be used to advance their cause. Mm. And if it ceases to advance their cause, they'll eject themselves.
Okay.
Okay? And you saw this when Jordan Peterson in Canada was on a debate on the CBC. And the one guy was like, well, I was really wondering whether I should come on here because giving you a platform might legitimize you. And I was like, yep, because it's all about who has authority, who has power, who has legitimacy. That's where that's at, okay? So there's this whole big, long tradition, okay? And it comes all the way back. So we need to talk about it for a little bit because we need to set some things up so that people can understand where it's coming from because it's a different way of thinking. Okay? On the old school kind of liberal way of thinking, which would include, classical liberal or Rawlsian liberal or even the conservatives of, say, Burkean, of the Burkean variety, or go back to America's founding fathers, or even sort of Clinton-style Democrats, or even Obama-style Democrats for that matter. The way democracy works is we come together, everyone puts their ideas forward, and then we have a vote. That's how it's supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And within that, there's all kinds of legitimate tools for changing people's minds. Persuasion, debate, argumentation, strikes, boycotts, all kinds of stuff. But the goal is to persuade people and proceed democratically. Okay?
Right.
The leftists are not thinking that, if we have a debate, the cream rises to the top and we get the best solution. If we're all debating the best ideas, marketplace of ideas, best ideas survive, blah, blah, blah. They believe that the solutions selected are predetermined by the way the system is structured.
Okay.
And to paraphrase Richard Reich from The Greening of America, the political and economic system don't determine the culture. It's the culture that determines the political and economic system. If you shift the culture, the system and the machine have no choice but to comply. Okay?
And who is that again?
That's Charles Reich in The Greening of America. That's not an exact quote, but it's close enough for what we're doing here.
It's funny. It does sound a little bit like Breitbart, too. Who said politics are downstream of culture.
Culture. Yeah, lots of people have said politics are downstream of culture.
What's one thing you've noticed about your body changing as you've gotten older? How has it affected your approach to health or recovery? Turns out the secret to healing, recovery, and resilience isn't just luck, it's stem cells. These are your body's built-in repair crew, but as we age, that system slows down. Fewer cells, weaker signals, slower recovery. This is exactly why Qualia Stem Cell was created. Your cells are powerful. Make sure they stay that way with Qualia's innovative new stem cell formula. Think of stem cells as your body's repair crew. Qualia Stem Cell helps them do their job better. It's not actually stem cells, guys. It's just something that supports the stem cells you already have. It provides stem cell support for your body's existing stem cell system for healing, recovery, and renewal. So to be clear, Qualia Stem Cell does not provide stem cells, you absolute lunatics. You don't have to accept slowing down. Help your body renew itself by reactivating the systems that keep you moving, healing, and thriving with Qualia Stem Cell formula. You only need to take it 4 days a month, preserving your body's regenerative capacity over time. So if you've ever felt like your body just doesn't bounce back like it used to, whether it's after a tough workout, getting sick, or just the wear and tear of life, not sleeping enough, whatever, this is for you. Qualia Stem Cell was designed to support your body's natural repair systems, helping you heal, recover, and keep going strong. And right now you can try it for up to 50% off at qualialife.com/Bridget. And here's the bonus. Use the code Bridget for an additional 15% off. That's QUALIA life.com/Bridget. Your body's built to repair itself. Qualia just helps it do that better. And a big thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode.
So if you go back, so first of all, there is a countercultural right, and we can talk about them in a minute. But if you go back, and if you read my article on Everyone's a Conspiracy Theorist Now, do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You'll remember that the undergirding theory of the entire political left is that the entire culture functions as a sort of system of brainwashing. Yeah?
Yes.
And that people are, that the repository of small c consciousness, of our social consciousness, you might say, is culture. If you want a different political system and you want different voters, you have to change the consciousness of the masses. You have to socially transform the consciousness of the masses. And the way you do that is by transforming the culture, right? Because it's the culture that people are soaked in which creates their consciousness, right? That's what they're going to argue, right? So they'll say, look, and you can see some of the postmodernism creeping in already, you're socially conditioned by your culture to have certain beliefs and see certain things as valid and other things as not valid. So all of your truth judgments and all of your political judgments and all of your value judgments are socially conditioned by the culture in which you live. And what they want to do is get outside of the culture, they want to wake up, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Matrix, become woke, right? Wake up to the way that the discourses are merely the expression of underlying systems and powers and structures of authority and power. Mm-hmm. That's their goal. Okay?
And that's the hyper-focus on language.
That's the hyper-focus on language and the hyper-focus on culture and the hyper-focus on symbolism, right?
And power.
That's right.
I mean, oppression, everything through this lens of you're either oppressed or an oppressor.
That's right. Because, and this is idea, you can find this in its embryonic form in Marx, right? Where Marx says that man is nothing but in the sixth thesis on Feuerbach, it says something to the effect of man is nothing but the ensemble of social relations, which mean man in the large sense, human nature just is the product of his social environment. And so if you want to make socialism work, you have to create the kind of man, as in mankind, the large scale sort of species of man that can live in a socialist environment right now. And so you do that by socially conditioning him, right? So you engage in a sort of social engineering of the human spirit in order to prepare man for this elevated, they think, communist utopia, which is why communism is always so utterly totalitarian, because it's not enough for them to set rules. They actually have to reach down into the soul of the human being and change the soul of the person to make them fit for the communist utopia. Right? Because if you're not fit for the communist utopia, you'll do all sorts of things, like be a subversive, and you'll rebel, and you'll protest, you'll be a stick in the mud, right? You'll get in the way. We need you all to be on board, right? So when they say, if everyone would just do this, things would be fine. Well, how do you make everybody just behave in a certain way? Well, you want to control behavior? You have to create the kind of person that behaves that way, which means the production of agency, the production of consciousness, the production of thought, all need to be engineered in a way that allows the socialism to flourish. Okay? That's why totalitarianism reaches in so deep. But if you compare that with the cultural analysis and the emphasis on culture, the picture that emerges is that they view culture and education and discourse as a machine for producing consciousness and agency, and a machine for essentially brainwashing the masses. And whoever controls the machine gets to brainwash the normies, right?
Yes.
So all the people, all the self-aware, awake people over here, and all these cynical capitalists who are controlling the system over here are all fighting for control of the brainwashing device that controls the normies, right? It's so funny too. I've been doing a lot of research on this other topic that I'm going deep into, and the disdain for the normies it comes from both the kind of the left, obviously, is very disdainful of normies, but I see it a lot on the counterculture right as well. They absolutely hate normies. Blanca Facundo was writing about Paulo Freire's educational system. Her conclusion, she says, is there's no way to avoid the elitism, the we are something special feeling in all of the examples. Okay? Because what she says is, pulling on Alvin Goldner, what she says is, look, all of the people who are doing this stuff, who claim to see through, are in some sense saying, I can see through the matrix and you can't. Right. Right? You've been duped by the system, by all the propaganda floating around and the lies. I see through the discourse to the underlying power structures, and I can see the manipulation, and you can't. Mm-hmm. Anytime you say, well, I need to wake up the masses, you're making yourself special. Right. Man. I mean, I think that is why conspiracy is so appealing right now, too. It's like you see these people, Candace Owens is a perfect example, where they can just endlessly emotionally edge their audience with this big reveal and keep them going and going and going and waiting for something and on the edge of their seats, and also at the same time make them feel like they're the people who are in the know and the rest of the people are just these sheeple walking around in this cloud who don't have access to this information. And it does really flatter that, righteous mind, self-righteousness that we all have on some level. Yeah, I think that's right. In this book, I just hit my mic. In this book, Heath and Potter point out that there's a whole pile of theorists who have claimed that everyone is a victim of conformity and groupthink. Like you find this in Marcuse's book on culture. You find this in like John Rastin Saul's book, The Unconscious Civilization. Like there's all these books that argue that, everyone is walking around unconscious, and they have different theories as to why. Like the postmodernists will say you were brainwashed by the discourse. The people who mix Marx and Freud say there's an ideology, operating at the subconscious level. The cultural theorists would say you've been socially conditioned by the culture to accept certain things. But at each level, they're basically saying, like, look, you've been brainwashed by the system, right?
I mean, Buddhists even have it. It's just that you've been brainwashed by reality, the material reality. There's some concept of this even in religions.
Yeah, as I wrote this, I said, as Joseph Heath and Andrew Potter point out, various theorists have been claiming everyone's a victim of conformity and groupthink, and that they all need to wake up, free their minds, smell the coffee, and get to work acting and living freely and authentically so they can escape the system. And yet, while everyone agrees that the masses need to wake up, nobody ever thinks that they themselves are the one who needs to be woken up. That's almost a direct quote. And then I said, after all, quoting Heath and Potter directly, it's never you who's unconscious. It's always the guy next to you or the guy who lives down the street. If everyone thinks that everyone else is unconscious, perhaps it's time to consider the possibility that we're all wide awake, and perhaps calling other people unconscious is just a way of dismissing the fact that not everyone thinks the same way that you do. And so what's happening here is that there are groups of people. This starts on the left, but it really exists on the right now too in a much stronger way, who see themselves as enlightened and awakened to the real truth of what's going on. Mm-hmm. Everyone else is trapped within the discourse and is underneath of the culture. They have managed to elevate themselves to the level of self-awareness, right?
Right.
In another book I have sitting over there, Fleeing the Universal by Karl Rapp, he talks about how this has the upshot of these theorists getting up and saying, everybody's work is completely loaded with bias and self-interest, including mine. It's like, okay, then why should we listen to you? Yes, but right. I'm aware of my bias and self-interest. Okay, does that help you mitigate it? Because if it doesn't, it still means your work is as shoddy as everyone else's.
Right.
Right? Like, it doesn't exactly inspire confidence. They kind of like feign at a sort of self-awareness and then say, well, that self-awareness, legitimizes my proceeding to the next point. And it's like, no, you're cutting off the branch that you sit on. I mean, Homi Bhabha was a post-colonial theorist who said, all of the knowledge production that was done by Western civilization was in fact part of a maneuver that was meant to disempower other discourses and other forms of knowledge. It was meant to marginalize the discourse of indigenous people and the oppressed, and et cetera, et cetera. And at one point he says, well, what if our jargon-laden academic discourse is just another form of dispossessing other people of discourse? What if that's what I'm doing? So he deconstructed himself, and this was considered to be a brilliant move on his part. Everyone just said, well, it's very good. Yes, right. Yes, excellent. Very good. And nobody ever thought to be like, this whole thing just eats itself in self-awareness. And what you're talking about with the normies is what they don't like about the normies is that the normies aren't self-critical, self-conscious, and eternally self-aware of the supposed politics of every interaction. Like the normie man buys his wife some flowers. I love you. And then he goes and watches football and she brings him a drink. And at no point does he say, is my purchasing her flowers an expression of my love, or is this really me just reinforcing gender roles which are oppressive?
Right. Well, we were joking about this.
Did I buy her these flowers as a way to show her love, or did I do this so that she would feel then obligated to do me something, and therefore this is a hidden power move? And his wife doesn't sit around and say, am I bringing him this drink because I love him? Or is this merely a form of sophisticated prostitution in which, in order to get resources from him, I agree to give him my body? What do we do? Like, they don't do that. And they're not with self-awareness about every little thing.
But we were talking about this yesterday on Dumpster Fire because of the whole, like, Hockeygate thing that exploded in the discourse. And we were laughing at, I have feet in many worlds. So feet in academic worlds, I will go from listening to a brilliant speaker at the University of Austin, the new university here, to doing comedy at the mothership for arguably a bunch of bros. And it is and then live in the suburbs with normie parents. And most of my siblings and we all come from hockey families, know many people who play this. Hockey moms and dads are completely out of their minds. They've got to get up at 5 a.m. for their kids to go. People just I'm like, do they not know anything? But we were joking about this on dumpster fire. I'm like, there's so many sexist jokes that you make in a normal, healthy relationship with your spouse. Like you're constantly teasing each other and playing into stereotypes or being. It's something that's so normal to just joke around. But also, when they started going after these hockey players when they laughed at this joke that Trump made, did they think that these boys or these young men were going to like have a struggle session with the president in that moment? Like what exactly, other than a polite chuckle at a boomer joke from the president, what are you expecting these people to do? It seems so completely unrealistic. Or it's like what world do you live in that you don't have a normal. Mark Normand had a great joke about the whole like BAFTA Tourette's thing, and he was like, I guess my uncle had Tourette's. Because I don't know if you've been following the BAFTA Tourette's guy screamed out profanities, and now it's like kind of an interesting oppression Olympics because he has a disability and they're black, and who's gonna win this fight? Yeah, and it's very like to your point. There are people who are analyzing this stuff all the time, and then normal people just going about their day. This is why I think the culture really did react and reject so much of the leftist, moral scolding and pearl clutching, is because it's so detached from reality. Like it's not grounded in any kind of real interactions that normal people have.
Well, I would say two things. First off, there's something odd in the idea that mental illness can cause people to murder their children but not say bad words.
Yeah.
That seems a little odd. Mental illness seems to be the kind of thing that can do whatever it is that my political side needs it to do. So I
we
really
always
don't
joke
like
about this on Dumpster Fire. We're like, oh, okay, so the trans person was mentally ill because they were anxious and depressed, not because they thought they were born in the wrong body. Like, that's not a mental illness.
Yeah, and well, I mean, again, when you make politics the measure of all things, the question for everything is, does this advance the cause, right? Because when everything is just an expression of power structures, the legitimacy of an idea depends on which power, whose interests are advanced, right? That's the question. So when someone says, I don't like the police, we need to get social workers involved because all of this crime is an expression of. And then you can have various forms of mental illness or whatever else. Then someone says bad words and go, well, that's an expression of racism. Well, couldn't it be an expression of mental illness? Well, is Tourette's real or not? Are you siding for or against the autists? Got to figure it out. And autism and Tourette's are not linked, but you could have them both in the same person. And so is the person who's autistically analyzing the discourse more correct, or the person who has Tourette's who can't control their themselves under certain circumstances, are they more correct? And the Tourette's guy was black. Oh no, right? And so at each point, it's a struggle over who gets to determine the legitimacy of what happened. Who has authority, who has power, right? So a lot of this is jockeying for authority. And one of the things I pointed out yesterday, I was like, the president said that, like, they're just missing the joke intentionally.
Yeah.
Like, Donald Trump said that Connor Hellebuck played not bad. It was one of the greatest goaltending performances in Olympic history, if not hockey. Like, it was incredible. Like, there's a few games that are like that. Dominic Hasek against the Canadiens in 1998. Ron Tugnutt had 73 saves back for Quebec in 1992 or 93. There's a few goaltending performances. The Stars versus the Sabres in the Stanley Cup, I believe it was in 1997 or 98. And both Ed Balfour and Dominic Hasek had amazing games. Like, there's a few games where like a guy stood on his head, and they're memorized they're remembered for that. And this is one of those games. And President Trump said, you played, goalies have had worse games. You played not bad. And everyone had a laugh, and someone said, hey, Helly, say hi to Don. And he goes, say hi to the president. He goes, hi, Don. Right? Like, these are men who are, you played okay. Thanks, Don. As if, the president of the United States is his friend, Don.
Yeah.
And you just played okay. Everyone's in on the joke, except for the people who've decided to be offended because it advances their interests. Right? They've decided to be offended about this.
They've not actually offended.
Well, no, what they've decided to do is... Well, they're offended, but they're not offended by the joke. They're looking to be offended by the joke. What they're offended by is the fact that the USA hockey team won't use their newfound influence and clout that they've gained from winning a gold medal to advance leftist politics by delegitimizing Trump by refusing to talk to him.
Right.
They're expecting you've won a gold medal, that's good. Your responsibility now is to be a mean girl to Donald Trump. That's your job. Right? That's what...
Right.
So now that you've got that gold medal and you've got all this attention, what are you going to do with that attention? Right? That's what they want. Your job, the clout and the influence and the social standing and status that you've earned are to be put to use in the service of our moral crusade.
And what is the moral crusade?
Wokeness, right? You're supposed to...
But what is the end goal?
Mark Leela says that the only thing that holds together the postmodern milieu is that all of these tactics are supposed to be useful in the service of creating in the service of how does he say it? All of these tactics are used in the service of pursuing a political program that remains conveniently ill-defined. And the reason they can't define it exactly is because that would create conditions for failure. So they can't specify conditions for success and failure because then they'd have conditions for failure. And, we all see what that happens, when that goes down, right? Like what happens when there's conditions for failure of say, socialism, right? Well, then what we get is we look back at the Soviet Union and say, hey, how'd that work? Right?
Yeah.
This policy will do this. Well, you tried that. So instead, they just kind of, they seek to proceed by negating everybody else and problematizing everybody else. And then they say we need a new way of thinking. We need a new politics. We need it is undefined. We don't know what it is yet, but we have to go dash into the future sort of a thing, right? And that way they avoid ever stipulating conditions for failure or conditions by which we can adjudicate whether their thing actually worked or not. Whether they're proposed, and I say thing advisedly because there could be a program, there could be a method, there could be a set of tactics, there could be a set of goals, there could be a set of laws, there could be a set of systems, whatever their suggestion is, right? Imre Lakatos, I'm going to pull up a quote here, said, has Marxism ever predicted a stunning novel fact successfully? Never. It has famous successful predictions. It predicted the absolute impoverishment of the working class. It predicted that the first socialist revolution would take place in the most industrially developed society. It predicted that socialist societies would be free of revolutions. It predicted there will be no conflict of interests between socialist countries. Thus, the early predictions of Marxism were bold and stunning, but they failed. Marxists explained all of their failures. They explained the rising living standards by the working class by devising a theory of imperialism. They explained why the first socialist revolution occurred in industrially backwards Russia. They explained Berlin in 1953, Budapest in 1956, Prague in 1968. They explained the Russian-Chinese conflicts, but their auxiliary hypotheses were all cooked up after the event to protect Marxian theory from the facts. Because their stuff doesn't work and always ends in disaster. So in order to protect their utopianism and continue to pursue it, they've learned to leave themselves in ways that leave them undefined. But I want to get back to something you said earlier about the normies. There is, I think, a significant amount of this which is driven by... There's hubris, there's pride, there's resentment, there's a whole bunch of things. But I really do think that there is an urge to think that you're above or superior or better, and that other people are just drones and sheeps and lemmings.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of what drives the continued pursuit of, how do I say this? I need to do this via an analogy. See, it's always interesting when we do this because I'm thinking my way through this stuff as we talk, so I can't give
I love it. So am I.
Crisp sound bites.
It's a real conversation.
Have you ever been in a situation where you committed a faux pas but didn't realize it? Like the kid who comes out of the bathroom and the toilet paper stuck to his leg and he has no idea?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or people are all kind of like, you say something stupid and everyone folds their arms and says, it looks like everyone gets it but you. Right? Have you seen that's what they want? That's what they want you to think. They want you to think that you're the one who doesn't get it. That's why they say it's not my job to educate you. Well, if you want people on your side, don't you want to educate them? No. What they're doing is it's a power move. It's, if you want my knowledge, you'll have to place yourself at my feet. Sufficiently submit to my intellectual superiority, right? That's they're putting on airs in a certain way, right? They're attempting to place themselves in the position and the high up position. So what's happening, what you're seeing the freak out by the sports writers is they've realized that people have rejected their values and their ideas, and they no longer have the social standing or moral authority to implement and impose their values and politics on everyone else. They don't have the capacity to get people fired or to punish people. Mm-hmm. They're now impotent. What do I do now? I guess you'll just have to you just write about sports. That's what you are now. They always saw themselves as something greater than that.
Right.
As an elect, as I am using, why are you a sports writer? Because you love sports? No, but it's greater than that. See, sports writing isn't actually all that important. So Searle in 1993, he wrote a book on, Is There a Crisis in American Education? And one of the things he talked about was the rise of Marxism in the humanities and in English departments in particular. And he talked about how he went to a modern language symposium of a certain sort. No, don't bite. He went to a modern language symposium of a certain sort. And he said he got the impression from being there that the people thought that their actual jobs, their actual academic work wasn't actually worth dedicating their lives to. So they've decided to dedicate their lives to something that's more worthwhile, advancing leftist politics, because that's actually important. Joe Heath talks about how, I keep quoting people, Joe Heath talks about how a lot of academics have this nagging feeling that what they're studying is really just highbrow entertainment. And therefore they need to pursue something that's more noble, that's greater. And I have a PhD, therefore I must have much more subtle, much more deep, nuanced, rich vein of thought than whatever you have. It's kind of like, whereas the normie guy who's like, I take care of my wife and we laugh at the fact that we're different, right? And it's just, I make dumb jokes about how I can reach the top shelf and you can't. And then she makes dumb jokes about how I forgot to pick my underwear up off the floor. Oh, look, we're different. And the leftist academic says, yes, but I'm on a higher plane than that. I see how those jokes are really the expression of power structures which oppress women. And you're complicit in those power structures. Right? I
get accused of being, the worst woman is laughing about these jokes all the time. But I come from a different time.
They are trying to construct you as an ignorant person.
Which is totally fine with me. In many ways, I am an ignorant person. I'm probably the definition of like a normie in many respects, that I appreciate normie culture. I'm a little bit of a normie. I'm like the opposite. I spent a whole lifetime being from the 90s of like wanting to be cool and so outsider-ish and Gen X and now I'm a bit of a normie supremacist. I'm like, no, the normies know what's up, and they're actually the people who keep this country going because they're getting up and they're going to work. Like I wake up every morning and I write, and I watch the person across the street from me I can see why people believe in like NPCs and that we're in a video game, because every morning at the same time, exactly the same time every day, he goes in, gets in his truck and goes to work and comes home pretty much at the same time every day. And I see shortly thereafter, the wife and kid get in their car, same time every day. And these people are just, they're Christians. They take care of their yard. It's just like a good neighborhood. And the disdain that I see online for all of that is crazy. And it's something that I couldn't really appreciate, nor did I ever think I would be a part of when I was young and in my 20s and was like, I'm too cool for all of that. Like, dumb, simple, normie stuff. And that's an area where I've actually shifted to the point where I have become very much a guardian of we must protect the normies at all costs. Let them live their normie lives.
Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? It is such a pain in the bum. If I want to get any sort of testing done to ensure I'm making my health a priority, I have to wait weeks for an appointment to see my doctor. Then I have to get a referral from her and wait weeks more for an appointment with the specialist I needed to see. Quest simplifies this process. I can purchase my own lab tests online and test for a multitude of health issues I might be concerned about. Then take those test results to my doctor, better armed with the information I need. At questhealth.com, you can get hundreds of tests across several different categories, from allergies to heart health, hormones, sexual health, women's health tests for egg quantity, perimenopause, menopause, men's health tests for testosterone, prostate, and so much more. These are lab quality tests, the same ones you'd be given at your doctor's office. So prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code WALKINS25 to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code WALKINS25 for 25% off. Link in the description below.
Marx has this quote. He said in the German ideology, he was talking about like, what would communism look like? What would some of the hallmarks be? He wanted to create a life where one could hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, and criticize after dinner. Right? Criticize being, Marx's philosophical criticism. And the question I have is, what if I don't want to criticize after dinner?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to quote more Joseph Heath and Andrew Potter from The Rebel Cell again. So Theodore Roszak wrote a book called The Making of a Counterculture. And he said that traditional working class interests like, going to a 4-day work week or a 5-day work week or whatever it was going to be. In France, it's 4 days. In the US, it's 5 days. Or saying, capping workout at 40 hours a week or whatever. Or, configuring the tax code to give the middle class a break while taxing the rich a bit more, or whatever it was, or, antitrust legislation, all the sort of typical, making, public school education free for everyone. All of this stuff is just tinkering with the turrets on the citadel, right? It's the center of the thing that has to be sought, that has to be changed, that has to be chipped away at, right? You're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Okay?
Right.
And that's all just technocratic changing. It's not the deep, meaningful change that's required.
Okay.
Right? So one can see here how the traditional interests of the working class have been downgraded to the status of a technocratic priority. Yet Roszak is in danger of simply taking the class interests of intellectuals and students, freeing the imagination, finding a new simplicity in life, and imposing them upon the rest of the population on the grounds that anyone who disagrees is a victim of the technocracy, right? The problem with assuming that everyone is the victim of a total ideology is that it becomes impossible to state what would count as evidence for or against this thesis. In the end, workers didn't seem all that interested in having their imaginations freed. Rather than flocking to art galleries and poetry recitals when given the chance, they continued to show an unhealthy interest in sports, broadcast television, and malt beverages. This naturally fed the nagging suspicion that the public at large might actually like capitalism, that they might genuinely want consumer goods. It suggested that the failure of capitalism to satisfy the deeper needs of the people might not be a problem. Perhaps the students had simply mistaken their own class interests for the general interest, assuming what is good for me is the same as what is good for society. And they weren't the first to do so, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you're seeing is, again, it's this idea that I am a higher status than you, and
Right.
I look down on you, must pull you up. And your failure to recognize my moral authority as a higher status person drives me insane.
I mean, I think this is like last night from the State of the Union where Trump was like, they're all crazy. I was like, I've never felt so seen in my entire life, because I think that is exactly what happened in that, especially 2024 election, was people just really had kind of had it with that feeling that everybody wasn't playing along with whatever this moral authority these people had bestowed upon themselves or felt had been bestowed on them. And it is actually driving them crazy. It is. I mean, lots of people are going crazy for different reasons, and it's not just on the left by any means, but there does seem to be a mental health crisis unfolding on the left, particularly with women, that is very unsettling.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. Rand Fisher-Kwan, the Substack writer, she has like 170,000 subscribers. She said, my boyfriend, here's a tweet from her, she says, my boyfriend is way more domestically functional and generous than I am, so I've had to start innovating new strains of feminist theory to maintain the upper hand. Recently, I've come up with the term weaponized competence. And I said, she means this as a sort of post-ironic joke, but this is actually how leftist social justice criticism works. Leftist intellectuals create theories to both delegitimize whoever's above them in the social order and to justify the leftists taking power for themselves. So, like, she's being funny, but I'm like, but unironically, that's actually what you're doing. Like,
right.
That's actually what's going on here, right? Because, and you can see these people in all of these are trying to instill themselves as the moral authority. They want their moral suppositions and their ideology to be the background operating assumptions for all of society. And they're trying to force that. And the reason why you saw, I mean, look, yesterday, Twitter became like the old Twitter, man. It was like 2018
It was.
again.
I was like, is this 2018? This is crazy. It was crazy.
Only they don't have any power to do it anymore.
Right. They don't have any power, but that doesn't. Here's the awareness that I came to yesterday that was even more unsettling than anything, is that I thought they would learn a lesson from their beatdown they took in 2024 when the culture pretty much rejected them. Maybe, and again, people will say, look, 70, it wasn't that, it was pretty close, and it wasn't like it was, there's still 70 million people voted for Kamala, blah, blah, blah. There are probably two Americas playing out. There might not be a culture, but the culture, my argument would be, there were, tech leaders with Trump, and you saw people started pushing back against this after a decade of really not. And then I realized, they don't want to learn a lesson. There's no intention of learning a lesson.
No.
They don't even think they need to learn a lesson. They're just going to keep going with this, actually. And that terrifies me even more in terms of what happens when they do get power again.
No. They can't learn a lesson from you because you're the one who needs to be taught, remember?
They don't. That's what I mean. There's no.
That's right. There's no humility.
There's no self-reflection. They don't say, maybe I'm the problem. They say these stupid racists still haven't learned.
That's correct. It's not that they're not self-aware. They're sort of hyper self-aware, but the lens through which they're hyper self-aware is their woke lens. So there's this idea of the unbearable searchlight of complicity, and you think about it like a giant searchlight that's just searching. And they have this searchlight of complicity that's searching through everything they do for any signs of being complicit with the oppressive patriarchal system, right?
Searchlight of complicity. It sounds like a horrifying sci-fi short story.
Think of like the Eye of Sauron that sees all.
No, that's what I'm imagining.
That's like they've internalized this, right?
Yeah.
So they've internalized that. They've got this internal mechanism which they have internalized and which you haven't. And they think that internal mechanism which they've brought into themselves makes them aware of themselves and of their behavior and gives them a social awareness that the rest of everyone else doesn't have.
Right.
And they because a lot of them are materialists or atheists or whatever, and there's no deep meaning in like an afterlife or something like that. The deepest meaning is to create justice now in the here and now and to get it right. There's something to that, but it's not crazy to want justice, but to them, everything has to be done here and to be done now. Right? And so they politicize things because by giving them political implications, it invests them with meaning.
Right.
Hockey, that's just some trivial hobby you have. Actually, no, this has deep political implications. Right? Your stories are just highbrow entertainment. No. I am constructing the culture and creating the conditions for social justice. My short stories have deep political impact. Right? My short stories. How can I put this? The pursuit of my hobbies is reconfiguring the social world. The pursuit of my hobbies is waking up people to injustice. The pursuit of my hobbies is building a better world. Right?
But it's always so. I mean, Jesse Kelly had a great tweet about this. Beware of anyone who tries to control you like this. These people are to be avoided at all times. Do this or blank. Say this or blank. If you're not saying blank, then you're blank. Controlling and manipulative. And this is why you were saying yesterday that the discourse felt very much like that. If you haven't apologized for laughing yet, you still have time. A lot of it was yelling at these young men for laughing and trying to put them on blast, and it does end up sounding and feeling very authoritarian, and I think people rightfully react to that. But I keep going back to Minnesota. That this is what got me wanting to talk to you about just the underpinning of this, like the psychological stuff I get with the population, or I'm beginning to more and more understand it. Although it does seem like they're just taking in a lot of this stuff without really thinking about it. It's not like all these people are reading these books. It's not like the people on Twitter are all reading Rules for Radicals and Beautiful Trouble. They're just absorbing this morally righteous position from, I guess, a lot of the media. I mean, I was watching a lot of like Jimmy Kimmel and stuff, the smug from late night, and from the position that basically all of the media assumes when talking down to the plebs. And I just keep coming back to my family member in 2015 who was like, I'm just so fucking sick and tired of these people talking down to me. And this is a person who's one of those normies who kind of makes society go as a first responder, is working in, making sure the waste management is getting done, like all these positions that make life capable for the people who are just sitting around judging everybody. And I don't know that they're all, I mean, some of them obviously went to school and studied a lot of this stuff, but I don't know that everybody did. And so how do you get people like I don't know, how do you end up with these situations in Minnesota where you have these organized groups of people who are clearly activists acting out on behalf of, I don't know, who is the leader? Is this like a headless leadership? This is what I don't understand about the structure of this movement. If it's even a movement, it doesn't even feel like a movement. It truly always just feels like this is the thing too that I had to get my mind around, is that it's not, and James Lindsay talks about this all the time online, it's not the action, it's the reaction to the action. That's from Beautiful like, Trouble. I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. You were the one who sent me that video. I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to answer that, but first I want to read one last thing from Joe Heath. People get mad at me for reading stuff all the time, but he says his stuff so well, and I want to ground it. The idea that the culture is some all-powerful controlling force tantamount to a system of mind control proved enormously attractive to many people. It's been difficult to dislodge, in part because it flatters the self-conception of academics and journalists. English literature professors are haunted by the suspicion that the books they teach are just highbrow entertainment, and so love nothing more than being told that their interpretive methods are sounding the death knell of Western civilization. And of course, people who work in the entertainment industry are happy to think they're not just in the business of providing entertainment, but are instead at the cutting edge of the struggle for social justice, reprogramming the software of the human mind to promote greater diversity and tolerance. It's all very empowering, even when formulated as criticism. So there's that aspect to it. I think what you just touched on there is kind of important. In everything that they're doing, they want to grab power to reconfigure society in the name of their sort of utopian vision.
And they as the activists, this is what I mean. Who's they? It always feels so amorphous and yet omnipresent. And maybe this is part of Beautiful Trouble. Maybe that is exactly the point.
So I have a friend who turned me on to a guy who, I think it was John Nurst, who's referred to this as the pommoid cluster. It's not an object or a person or a thing. It's more like a swarm.
Yeah, it does feel that way. That's what I mean. It feels like you can turn it on and off.
It should feel, because it's totally decentralized.
Yeah. And
each of these people, every once in a while, you'll see like little clusters of it rise, right? It's like
sleeper cells.
Or think of like a drink. Like you have a milkshake, and every once in a while, like some of the milkshake clumps together and then like dissolves again. Then a different part clumps together and then dissolves again as you drink. They're like that. So every once in a while, that you have a shooting star who comes, Ibram X. Kendi, pew, and everyone falls onto him for a while, and then he burns out, and then pew, another guy comes through with his latest fad, because there is no leadership, there's no hierarchy, right? They don't believe in hierarchy officially, right? Hierarchy is just the imposition of power. Who wants to be at the top? Who decides who gets to be at the top? Whose interests are served by who's ever at the top, right? And so very, very often they tend to criticize authority, which is formally exercised, and then seek to exercise authority without looking like they're doing it.
Right.
So, and very often you'll have some person who's really articulate or says something that they all really like, and that person becomes a sort of guru on the left and can for a time become a power broker until they get criticized by the next guy, right? So I keep saying right as a tick. Henry Giroux was sort of one of the leading theorists of Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy, which was a neo-Marxist pedagogy which sought to use the school system as a way to arouse the consciousness of the students to their political situation. and then empower them to change it. Translation, they want to turn the kids into activists.
Right.
And Henry Giroux was a progenitor of this. Right up until the point that he got challenged by a group of women for saying that all the people that he was citing were men, all the people that he was using were men, and that he hadn't sufficiently taken into account feminist postmodernism. But they didn't realize that Henry Giroux has fully internalized like the entire system by himself, and he easily just turned that right back around on them, integrated their critique in it and spit it back out better than they could, which is why he's been at like the top of the heap for decades, because nobody can outduel him in a woke off. Because as woke as you can be, he can be like, you'll do a meta level analysis of him, and then he'll do a discursive meta level analysis of your meta level analysis of him, and why, and all the possible criticisms of himself, which he'll then make of himself, while then encouraging everyone to reach out further. Right? This is the Eminem theory. When Eminem makes fun of himself so that nobody else can make fun of himself, Henry Giroux's kind of do that. He's so self-critical that nobody else can be self-critical of him. Because even if you tried to be self-critical of him, he would point out the ways in which your criticism of him wasn't quite self-critical of you. You weren't self-critical enough in criticizing his self-criticism.
Right.
There's
It's all
no
such
way to,
bullshit.
it's a fun house. It's just endless mirrors of discourse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And jockeying for social position to be ever who can be the person who can say the thing that is now in this particular discursive moment seen as profound. And if you want to see how that works, go back and look at the stuff that was seen as really profound 10 years ago and look how badly it's aged.
Like
and then you can see how
Robin D'Angelo or whatever her name is.
Like Emma Sulkowicz walking around on campus with a mattress.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just look at how cringy that is today. But at the time, it was seen as like this noble, profound thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the unexpected thing, which we can't quite wrap ourselves around, sort of gets mystified. And then you can have all these people and put their meaning on it. And then when you look back on it, you'd be like, you were just like a moral entrepreneur. That's what
so
you
much
were.
of it, yeah. So much of it feels too like chasing youth to me. Like now I see the older women who are my age and they're all on TikTok or Instagram, and they're seeing that the younger women, Gen Alpha, not even Gen Z, are cringing at the guys who are based from Gen Z. They're looking at Gen Z, they're mocking them, it's the younger generation taking out the generation above them, the thing that we all do for all of time. But the weird thing now is that you have these young, older people who are kind of it's clout chasing and it's youth chasing and whatever, however you want to look at it. And I'm like, and trying to get the approval of these younger people. Some of it is because they have kids are these ages and they're these parents who desperately want to be cool for their kids. Some of it is just women who have been online for a long time aging and now chasing the cool that they had at one point when they were online that they no longer have because they're aging out of it. And this is just a trend I've noticed with women. I don't see it as much with men particularly. But I'm like, I understand the desire to like chase that younger audience, and in the right wing and in the kind of center independent space, I see this happening. This is how you have everybody kind of riding Nick Fuentes' coattails because he's got the younger based audience. Although even now he's being taken out by younger people that like the clavicular guy who is now, there. It's this part of it is just normal generational stuff that's happening online as people jockey for coolness and social power and algorithms and likes and all of that is now money now. So, but then there's some of it that's weird because you see it. You see the older people who I feel should kind of know better chasing the 20-year-olds that are going to look back and go, oh, that was not cool. Like you said, we look back at the woman with the mattress and we're like, oh. I was watching the like Pokemon Go today. Do you remember Hillary Clinton when she was like basically tanked her whole run in one moment? But she was like, we're going to go Pokemon Go to the polls. And you see the kids like clapping and they pull away. And there's one girl who's like, I was like, she's got the eyes looking sideways. And I'm like, that was even looking back. It's like, oh God, that is, yeah, it's not aging well. None of this stuff is none of the, especially like this woke critical theory stuff is aging well at all.
So a few things.
So it's strange to me that people are chasing it.
I saw Alyssa Liu, the gold medalist, talk about how her goal in the competition was to mog. I was just like, as much as we're going insane on the right a little bit right now, like our crazies on the right, there's a difference between our crazies on the right and their crazies on the left. Their crazies on the left are cut and paste. Our crazies on the right are genuinely like interesting, like anthropologically interesting as like a study. Like clavicular, like
he's a Kardashian. This is
having
the
one of
piece
those
I
like
wrote.
little, like one of those things that goes like this, like one of those massager things that goes like this, and then like hitting his face because he wants his high cheekbones to be better. And you have that, and then you have like Nick Fuentes, right?
Nick is at least entertaining.
It's clavicular, and then there's this whole like mogging contest between like him and the ASU frat bro. And
I hate all of these words.
It's totally like, and some guy says clavicular was looks maxing, but he got gesture gooned by a guy who was, and it's this all this lingo, and it's from one right-wing subculture to the next, there's entirely new lingo and entirely new people, and it's at the very least it's interesting and it's different. Whereas on the left, if I know the position of a leftist on one thing, I can tell you what they think on every issue. I know where they stand on everything.
I don't know that, you've seen this with a lot of the shooters and whatnot. And I see this a lot online when I go down these rabbit holes and there are young people talking about how if you even are plotting anything on a right or left axis, you basically sound like a boomer because they've weirdly transcended all of this, and they have you really see the synthesis of this in these shooters that are, you can't, the guy in Rhode Island who was trans, but also MAGA, and also you saw, there's no real way to like map these people.
That's the bottom of the horseshoe. What they're doing is the axis there is not left and right. The axis there is how online are you.
Right.
All of these people will code left or right. But at some point, the signal it's what signal is strongest. So I'm a dad. I'm a Christian. I'm ethnically Jewish. I'm a hockey player. Played football.
So you're a fascist.
I'm a lot of different things.
Just kidding.
But certain signals will be stronger than others.
Right.
Like my father's family is a very small part Scottish. Okay? The Scottish cultural signal out of me is very weak. It's a thing like that. The signal at a certain point, there's so many layers of irony that the signal starts becoming how online are you?
Right.
And what is your ability to navigate the various levels of discourse?
Right. It's like a video game.
Yeah.
It's like Donkey Kong, where you just go like up up or down every level, but you're just trying to
like, do you know, like if I said to you that Nick Fuentes was gesture gooning clavicular because he got looks maxed and mogged by the ASU frat bro, the fact that you don't know what that means locks you out of certain conversations and locks you out of certain sub-communities and marks you as a person who doesn't get it.
They did this with all of their crazy language that they had, that was all the privilege and the And they did this with the pronouns. They did this with critical theory. They did this with critical race theory. I mean, how many weird words and vocabularies did people come up with in the past decade? So now it's the same thing.
And so on Looksmaxer forums, they have developed an entirely separate language unto themselves. The Looksmaxers have their entire lexicon and vocabulary ready to go. I don't know. I put out a clip a while back. We'll find that maybe you can insert it here afterward. But where I pointed out, I said when I was talking about Baudrillard and the hyperreal situation that we find ourselves in, right? That one of the things that you're seeing this in is bodybuilding. And I tied transgenderism and bodybuilding together, and I said, not only are you having men become women, but in bodybuilding you have men that are more men than men. They're male to male transsexuals. Right. Yeah. Right. Like you take a woman, move her toward male. Okay. Now take a man that's here. Now move him toward male. What do you end up with? You end up with clavicular taking methamphetamines and being on steroids and making himself in order sterile. to making himself sterile in order to look like the hyperreal perfect image of a man that nobody can look like. He wants to embody in real life the image of a man that can only be created with Instagram filters.
So what do you think
so all of this comes together. So you can't be monocausal. Like I can't blame everything on critical theory, because a lot of this is technological and a lot of this is coming out of the way that internet enables discourse, because internet allows you to create concentrations in communities which are far greater than what you could have otherwise come to. So think about it. I live in a city of like probably 200,000 people right now. In my city, if I wanted to find a group of people who wanted to Looksmax, I might be able to get a community of 20. Maybe. If I said, okay, male aesthetic self-improvement, I could get 100. But if I go onto the internet, I can get a community of 20,000 men together who are like this. And
my those 20,000 men, normies aren't online.
Those 20,000 people can accelerate the discourse and the rate of discourse. Because think about it, like 20,000 people, that was an entire civilization at one time. And now I can have that community just running a discourse. So all of the discursive progress is speed run by people who are hyper focused and hyper interested in that one thing. And because of this, it's there's not a monocausal thing that can happen here. What you're seeing on the left, though, and what separates it from the right, is that the right influencers are just looking for something, and there's no underlying core or ideology. Now, in some sense, that's scary because it means they're utterly nihilistic.
Mm-hmm. That's what it feels like.
And I mean, Fuentes has no core. Tate has no core. They're just riding through the discourse because everything's been deconstructed. Mm-hmm. Their entire what would you call it?
But it's really just like I was saying that Fuentes is really just kind of a new age shock jock. It's just he's just saying the thing that's the most extreme now. But now that everything has been said, now that Fuentes is out there and they're dropping the N-word and they've gone with like, you know, hating the Jews and all the third rails have been there's nowhere left to go. So what happens?
Well, so the first thing is because they don't have a core, they have nothing to wrap themselves around. So it's all baser instinct stuff. This is why the Tates are so attractive, because what are the Tates chasing? It's the basest instincts: money, sex, power. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And whereas the feminists were going to nitpick every aspect of masculinity down to the smallest drop in order to tear it down, because it was seen as a pillar of Western civilization, and so and the root of patriarchy, and so the patriarchy needs to be exterminated at its root. Well, if everything I do is illegitimate, then I'll just adopt a post-ironic posture of detached amusement to the whole thing.
Right.
So Nick Fuentes, I mean, this is why I say, I was joking with someone, I'm going to write an article called Propositional Racism and Creedal White Supremacy. Because the racism is purely propositional, has nothing to do with biology anymore. It's just proxies.
Right.
So like Nick Fuentes is a white supremacist. Okay, you're a Mexican. The leader of the Proud Boys is named Enrico. I mean, Andrew Tate's a quarter black. All of these people who are engaged in this like white supremacy, it's just a vector for their distaste toward the common culture. Which,
well, and what opened
for them, their common
what opened that up was things like the calling the black guy in LA who was running for governor, and they were calling him a black white supremacist, and the inherent white supremacy in the people who voted for Trump. So that door was open for them to be. Yeah,
yes, I agree. The left completely opened this door because what the left did white supremacy and said, well, you can have racism without racist. It's all systemic. It has not. It's not necessarily a product of your skin color. What's whiteness? We don't know. And all of a sudden, well, if anyone can be a white supremacist, I mean, my friend Razib Khan once made the comment. He said, "White supremacy is incredibly diverse."
Right.
And it is. When you go out to the white supremacist forums, like there's black guys who are like, I hate other black people. Like none of these people are actually like this. It's just they're aiming their guns at the proxies for the culture, which is basically said, you're not allowed to be a masculine heterosexual white male or we're going to nitpick you to death.
Right.
The ambient
what we saw yesterday.
The ambient hostility that's been floating around toward men and masculinity for decades and which gets completely ignored by the common culture is the thing that's being pointed at when the right tries to talk about the longhouse.
I know. Yeah.
That's what they're pointing at. Like that guy, Jack Hughes, big smile, broken teeth, bloody mouth, American flag. And then these guys are joking with Trump after, and they're like, people are like, I can't believe that you would say these things. And I'm sitting here going like, do you understand the kind of spirit you have to have? Just like what your emotional constitution needs to be the kind of guy who says, my teeth are broken, and put me in, coach. Yeah. Like, what kind of guy do you think? Now, here's the other thing. Jack Hughes had a challenge last year for how many books he could read during the NHL season, and he got to 50.
Wow.
He's not stupid. He's not.
Yeah.
He's intelligent.
Yeah.
Obviously. But
I just also don't think
the kind of
people...
spirit that he has is going to be completely opposed to, okay, so you decided that you were going to do a racism. I didn't say anything. Well, all the books you read, how many were by black trans women? Like that sort of school of army spirit is just so antithetical to, I broke my teeth and my mouth is bleeding, put me in, coach. The kind of man you have to do to be that is just completely antithetical to the spirit. Now, there's the underlying propositions of the political left, and you will find some men who do have that spirit who are on the left. A very small number of them, though, because it's not just the content and the substance, but the mode of expression which the Democrats have chosen to express it. And that particular content is most easily expressed in a feminine coded way, which is why you have that sort of gentle parenting uptalk lady that shows up on right. All the time that like bird hands, right? Who goes, talks, how to gentle parent your uncle during Thanksgiving. No, you're not allowed to say, we call people by the names they use. No, we don't get to choose their pronoun. And you sit there and you go, if you're trying to be off-putting to men, You're succeeding. Now compare that woman, right, to the guy who, to Connor Hellebuck, getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his goaltending and standing there and almost wanting to cry.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things are just incompatible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that last night, people were talking about the vibe shift. I think the vibe shift they thought they had was manufactured. I don't think there's been a vibe shift. I think people were getting a little bit sick of some of the Trump administration's antics. And some of the, we didn't like the Minnesota discourse, and people were kind of like, oh, not here we go again with George Floyd. I think last night just reminded everybody of why. I mean, if there was ever a time for Donald Trump to solidify young men in the GOP for 30 years, he did it last night. And I don't think that the left still can't figure out why. They can't figure out, well, look, we have bookish academic people and young single women who are willing to scold young men over slight infractions and over social minutia. And it's like, yeah, well, we're policing their behavior. We're educating them. We're teaching them. It's like, yeah, you are. I couldn't find a single leftist account yesterday. It was just like, I'm a leftist and I'm woke as hell, but good on them for winning. When Alyssa Liu won her medal, Americans on the right were like, she fled China? Yay, we won. And someone said well, they just don't like that woke bitches are winning. And somebody, I can't remember who, was just like, haha, no, all figure skaters are woke, but our woke bitch beat your woke bitch. So technically we're still winning. That's the spirit of the political right. And as much as there's crazy brain rot floating around in conspiracism on the right.
Completely crazy brain rot.
The right normies are still that.
Yes.
And sort of leave the gays alone conservatives. If that phrase makes any sense, those people still have a significant chokehold on the culture right now. I wanted to go through Beautiful Trouble. We should probably do that before we wrap up at some point.
Yes,
but
let's go through it.
Beautiful Trouble is split up into 4 sections. There's tactics, principles, theories, and case studies.
I really do think we should do a dumpster fire video on this too.
We should. We can.
I would love to talk about it because this is what I wanted to talk to you about. But I also want to do I think if we can do a kind of narrated dumpster fire video where we take people through it to explain it, because it does seem, I think people can sense that there's some organization under this, that there's some kind of something, but I don't think they have any idea how actually truly organized this stuff is. Like you said, on a meta narrative level where people, it's not just, we're community organizers and we're going to get the people out. They're aware of how they're perceived. They're aware of even just little things like how they suddenly started bringing the American flag to their protests.
Picture a guy that only uses a hammer for everything. You have a screw, hammer. Have a nail, hammer. Have a bolt, hammer. Fix your TV, hammer. It's like, okay, man, you can't, your hammer's going to damage things, it's going to break stuff. But if you need a guy with a hammer, you're going to call him because he will do things with that hammer you never thought of. They're a little bit like that. So everything they do within the discourse, they are spectacular discourse engineers. Mm-hmm. That's why they often do so well in the arts. Right? Mm-hmm. Arts is their world, man, because discourse is their world. And a lot of these people, because they are, artists tend to be a little bit more fluid. And so they have a lot more sympathy towards things like, transgenderism. Oh, fluid identity. Well, I feel like that sometimes. Sure, yeah. Going outside the boundaries of society, I love that. They just don't realize that if there's no boundaries, there's nothing for them to challenge. Mm-hmm. Part of why their art becomes boring is because what are they going to challenge now? Mm-hmm. Like, what's left? There's only a couple of taboos left, and they're the ones that... I mean, Epstein discourse has really kind of boxed them in because they can't challenge that taboo yet. right? Because of Epstein discourse. The only remaining taboos are the ones around consent and sex. That's it. Like, if you commit rape or murder, you're still bad. But everything else is pretty much on the table. And so what are they going to do? Challenge the murder? The prohibition against murder is really just an expression of patriarchy. Like, you're not going to get that, right? Like,
yeah. Well, they tried.
So, but what's left? They don't have anything left they can go to. And because everyone is so Epsteined out, so even things like in the early 90s, in gangster rap, being a pimp was seen as kind of cool. That discourse has been Epsteined out of existence, is what I'm referring to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
like if you walk out and says, I'm a pimp, man, people will be like, oh, really? Hi, Epstein, how are you? Oh shit, right?
I know.
So,
my husband and I were joking about this in the car the other day when we were like, because we're in Austin and this is where Dazed and Confused was, and he was like, so Epstein was basically Matthew McConaughey and Dazed and Confused. Like,
right?
We all laughed at that in the 90s, but now it's like that's been Epstein out of existence too, because he was like, I can't get older, they just stay the same age.
Yeah, like in Dazed and Confused, Matthew McConaughey's character was like, haha, now it's kind of like...
hitting on a 15-year-old.
Yep, and now it's like, you better check that driver's license, man, because they'll find you. The mommy, that's what the mommy sleuths think this, right? They see themselves as like, finding the Epsteins of the world, right? So that Epstein discourse has set an edge in culture that you can't touch at the moment. But pretty much anything else has been deconstructed already. And
that's interesting.
Right? Like, the Epstein discourse has made it so that at least online, you can't talk about murdering, like being a pimp, anything to do with sex trafficking. So all that stuff that was kind of like glorified in like 90s rap videos where like, I'm a pimp, man, and I'm running bitches and blah, blah, blah. Like that kind of shit. You can't do that now. If you did that now, everyone would just like make Epstein memes about you and you'd be instantly cringified. But pretty much everything else has been completely torn apart. This is part of the reason why the young right is so nihilistic, because everything's been delegitimized. And part of what's happening with Trump is the gold medal team yesterday from the States is what they're doing is they're rehabilitating that old level masculinity.
Right.
That's being re-legitimized. It's like, actually, no. Draping yourself in the American flag with broken teeth while winning the gold medal for the first time in forever, that's a good thing. We're going to struggle his mom over that joke, and his mom is just like, I raised 2 sons to win the gold medal, and I played for USA Hockey, and no, you're not going to struggle session me over my kids.
I didn't see this, but you're so right. That's totally what they did at this State of the Union, even all the awards they gave and everything. They're just reasserting healthy masculinity, because there's so much. You have the Andrew Tates and like all the people we've mentioned. It's not a healthy version of masculinity, and no man I know looks up to that. But I do know that men I know get emotional watching World War II vets get medals, and men who rescued 150 people from floods. Like, that is something that moves normal, healthy, masculine men.
So my son, let me show you this. So this is my son's hat. It's the Winnipeg Jets.
Yep.
And I bought my son his hockey stick. And yesterday my son played in his first ever hockey game.
Oh.
Yeah, my son started hockey late. He's a little bit slower to pick some of these things up. He was diagnosed with autism. He's high functioning though, very high verbal IQ. But low on the processing side of things sometimes. So he has to work at stuff. But he played in his first hockey game yesterday. His first actual competitive game, with a referee and the whole bit. And he has a little buddy that he plays with, who is my best friend's foster kid. And they're on the same team together. And they played on the ice. They were on the ice together. And I was just like so proud.
It's the best.
The Jets are the team that Connor Hellebuck plays goalie for in the NHL. Mm-hmm. So my son knows who Connor Hellebuck is because that's his goalie. Mm-hmm. So when I saw Donald Trump said, we're going to give Connor Hellebuck the Medal of Freedom, I took my son over and he watched that. And I popped it up on my phone and said, watch this. And I was like, look at him. And do you see how he looks like he's going to cry? My son's like, yeah. I was like, that's because that man is so proud because he did that for his country. And I said, he played the best game of his life in that gold medal game. And I said, that award they're giving him is the highest medal of all the medals that you can get, that an American could get. That's like getting the Order of Canada in the US. Like, that's how important that is. That's the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's the highest honor. And they're giving it to him because of what he did. And I showed that to my son, and he just like glowed and beamed. And it's like, that's what you can aim at. And I'm a Canadian man. I wanted to see Canada win so badly. But you know what? Watching the embittered Canadians be sour about this, it's kind of almost off-putting to me. And I don't think Canadians realize how off-putting it is just in general. Because we've had this happen before. This exact same situation happened in '98 when the Czechoslovakian goaltender, or the Czech goalie, Dominik Hasek, shut out a Canadian team with Eric Lindros, Wayne Gretzky, Brendan Shanahan, and Joe Nieuwendyk. We got one goal in that game. We put it to overtime, and then we lost in the shootout. And it was because we got beat by a goalie who was world class, who was multiple Vezina Trophy winner. And guess what? Hellebuck's won the Vezina Trophy twice in a row. We've had this happen before. It is not the end of Canadian hockey. I don't know why. There's just no reason for Canadians to be sour about it. The only reason they're being sour about it is because apparently, those players like Trump, I guess. And so, Canadian media is going to go after them. And I don't think that Canadian media is ready to they don't realize the level of standing they have compared to a guy who comes back from the Olympics and says, I just won a gold medal and I beat you. You don't have standing in this conversation.
I mean, it's also just funny because I think it's very much Don Draper in the elevator. I don't think about you at all.
There was
the funniest thing about all this discourse, and we were talking about this last night in my dumpster fire chat, is that America didn't even win the most medals in the Olympics. No. They're running around acting like it's erased in all of this is that we got silver, overall. So
yeah, but it doesn't matter because
it doesn't matter.
It's who that team was, what they did, how they did it.
Totally.
But when in Canada, there was a Blue Jays pitcher a few years ago who preached against homosexuality on his TikTok, like a minor Blue Jays pitcher. And afterwards, he came up and gave a thing afterwards, and the Jays were good. There was this outcry in Canada to get rid of him among sports journalists. I don't think average Canadian, but sports journalists did. And he gave an explanation. And this woman who's a sports journalist, I don't know her name, but after it was done, just gave this disgusted towards him after he was done explaining himself. And I'm like, he's a baseball player from the southern United States. What did you think you were getting?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what were we expecting here?
Wait, so let's talk about Beautiful Trouble too, because I really want to get to that before we.
Okay, but I'll just finish this point, then we'll move to that, because otherwise my brain won't flip over. That level of disgust, they struggle session that guy because he was an almost minor leaguer, up and down to the minors. It's marginal to get rid of him. They have that. The American players that are going to come back are the best players on their teams.
Yeah.
Are team captains. You are not trading Connor Hellebuck. But if you harass him, he might leave.
Right.
I don't think that the Canadian sports media and the sports media in general realizes the delta, the gap between them and their audience.
Yeah, that's what I felt yesterday really strongly. Everyone I knew on Sunday, every single person I knew was at a hockey game with their children, watching the hockey game on TV. That was the normie experience. Many people were watching. It was the numbers came out yesterday or the day before, it was the most viewed pre-9 a.m. game sporting event in the history of American sports viewing. It's it's so many people were just the gap between the people who are commenting on the conversation Trump had. I bet those circles don't even overlap. The people who are commenting on that remark versus the people who are watching the game. And that is the level of disconnect between the people writing and talking about this and the general public and the audience and the normies.
I don't think they understand the delta, and I don't think they understand the gap. And I think that they see themselves as, again, being the enlightened elect people that need to educate all of you people who don't understand. And I don't think they realize that the people do understand. They've just rejected you. We don't actually think that you're that smart. And we're not actually interested. And by the way, if you were such a genius, you'd persuade me, and you can't.
Right.
And having some guy who writes about the game for a living challenge the moral character of a guy who plays the game for a living is not going to go over well. And when somebody, there was a lot of people who were saying, like, Jack Hughes, he put the rainbow on his tape and now he's visiting Trump. And I'm like, yeah. Now he likes the gays, but he's a likes the gays conservative, I guess, or a likes the gays centrist. Yeah, gay people, cool. You controlling my entire life from what I'm allowed to say. Not going to let that happen, but like gay people. Sure, yeah. I'll support you with my rainbow tape. Why not? I'll be nice to you. They really believe that they have an entitlement to set the boundaries of discourse, and they really believe that they have the right to control what is seen as legitimate in the public square.
Well, and it's not enough that you're like, I support that, cool. You have to be an outspoken activist ally out there working for their cause, or it's not enough. So it's not enough to be like, cool, I'll support you, I'll be nice to you, I'll respect you. You have to actually be this active ally working on your behalf. It's a really crazy level of narcissism that I don't fully comprehend either. But again, maybe this can segue us to Beautiful Trouble because it might be baked into that cake. Bake the freaking cake, bigot.
So we're going to chart out with principle 1 for Beautiful Trouble. I'm going to the website now because most of this is in the
on
book.
The website.
Well, also most of this is in the book, but in addition to stuff being in the book, I want to use the stuff on the website because the website allows me to share it. And it lays it out in a way that's a little bit, I think, maybe a bit cleaner.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, choose tactics that support your strategy. The strategy is your overall plan. Tactics are those actions you do to implement it, a critical distinction for effective campaigning. Don't organize a rally before you know whether it serves your larger game plan. Okay?
Yeah.
So, the two takeaways here are this. The strategy development guide they go through is analyzing the problem, identifying a goal and formulating demands, understanding your target, who holds the power to meet your demands, and identifying specific forms of power you have over your target and how to concentrate that power to maximal effect. Okay?
Right.
Once we understand the forms of power we can deploy, we're ready to develop our game plan. So that's the first thing. Choose tactics that support your strategy. That's before we get going. We want to make ourselves aware of what our strategy is, and then make sure that as we do that we have our tactics that are synergistic with that strategy rather than counterproductive.
Right.
Then it's choose your target wisely. A campaign's success or failure often hinges on correctly identifying your target, the specific person or entity with the institutional power to meet your demands, and then going after them strategically. Okay? Now, I did a thread some time ago. Very often what they'll say is you can pick a smaller target that allows you to lean on a bigger target. And then you can build up, right? With each target you take.
I mean, this is a little bit what we saw in Minnesota.
That's right.
Go after the individual ICE agents to lean on the entire DHS and the infrastructure.
That's right. And part of the way
it's
that
so
this works,
crazy how fast that disappeared out of the, like, that was everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just nowhere.
Minnesota is gone. That's right.
I mean, it was successful. They pretty much withdrew from Minnesota.
To a certain degree, yes. Going back to you might not have enough power to push your primary target at first, but your actions may help you identify a secondary target, an individual or group that can be pressured to leverage their influence on the primary target. The Coalition for Imaluki Workers, for example, won their battle by identifying and pressuring a secondary target, fast food corporations, when their primary target, tomato growers, proved immovable. So we couldn't get the tomato growers to do what we want, but who are their customers? Fast food chains. Well, we can pressure them.
But who's running these groups?
Well, I'm gonna walk you through it, and as you walk through it, that'll become more clear. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing, right? We're choosing our target wisely. Then we have, when we're doing that, after we have that, let's push this here. We're gonna go. We have power mapping. Map the power dynamics at play to identify your primary target and design a winning campaign strategy. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to identify the problem you're trying to fix, expand your knowledge till you have a broad understanding, and then you identify the main key parties. They include those responsible for creating the problem, those who have power to fix the problem but are not doing so, those who are geographically relevant to the issue, those who are working to fix the problem, etc., etc. You're going to research the key parties. There's going to be institutions, but institutions don't make decisions. People do. So you've got to find out who makes the decisions in those institutions. And then you've got to answer a few questions about these people. Do they disagree with you? And how much power do they have? Okay? Once you do that, you get a diagram that looks like this. Okay? Step 4, plot where all the key parties stand, draw out a version of the power mapping axis on a board or chart or paper, and put each stakeholder on its post-it, right? And then identify your primary target. This is the point when you figure out who has the most influence over the issue and who is most likely to give you what you want. The perfect target would be both very powerful and already supportive. The hardest target to move, but at the end you will often face and be forced to take on, is someone with a lot of power who strongly disagrees with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And if you can't decide on a single target, but have the capacity to focus on one, proceed to the next step with the most likely candidates. So again, Alinsky lurks here in a certain way, right? Because institutions don't hurt, but people do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we have the pillars of power. Identify the institutions that your target relies on for support so you can weaken or disrupt their power. Power ultimately rests in the hands of millions of ordinary people who keep society running on a day-to-day basis, but who could shut it down. And so they have a spheres of influence power map, which has like, on the one side, it's like business owner, managers, workers, consumers. And then for politics, it could be like dictator, general, other officers, and enlisted men. And then what you're going to do is you create sort of a building. So they pick for here a commune or a dictatorial regime, and they have the regime and the status quo, and underneath it, the institutions of the military, the schools, the government, the business, the religion, and the media.
Mm-hmm.
Identify the pillars that constitute institutions that support the target. Identify which pillars are most critical to holding up the system, and determine where you may have the most potential to impact the strength of a pillar. And the way to determine where you may have the most potential to impact the strength of a pillar is by analyzing the internal construction of each pillar, right? What makes it up? Who's involved? And that, this big picture analysis gets used with a more in-depth strategic planning tool, such as the spectrum of allies. Well, what's the spectrum of allies? Let's move to that next. Movements seldom win by overpowering the opposition. They win by shifting support out from under it. So you use a spectrum of allies analysis to identify the social blocks in play and locate those groups on a spectrum from active opposition to active allies. And then you want to shift each block over 1 point. So I have here under spectrum of allies, we have active opposition, passive opposition, neutral, passive allies, and active allies. Okay? The active allies are the people who agree with you and fight with you. Passive allies are those who agree with you but don't do anything. Neutrals are unengaged. Passive opposition are people who disagree but aren't trying to stop you. And active opposition are the people that are trying to stop you. The goal is not to shift the whole spectrum to your direction. The goal is to shift each group over 1 point. You want the neutrals to say, well, fine, I guess I'll just say I support you. You want your passive opposition to remain neutral. And you want your active opposition, well, they can still be opposed, but they're going to shut up about it. We want them to stop fighting. Okay? And you want to shove each group over 1 point. So the goal is not to make everyone necessarily agree with you, but if you shift the whole thing over 1 point at a time, you're still winning.
Yeah.
And so what that does is once you map the territory, right, that power map combined with the spectrum of allies analysis allows you to see who lies where and who you can move over 1 point and what that will do for you. Okay? And then the pillars allows you to see, once you start moving people over, which of those pillars can you make crumble?
Yeah.
Okay? So, for example, for Donald Trump, one of his pillars might be, support from evangelical Christians. Well, how can we shift evangelical Christians from supporting Trump to neutral on Trump? Thereby weakening that pillar of support. Okay? That's just an example.
Right.
All right. So once you do your spectrum of allies analysis and you've chosen your target, step 1 is to put your target in a decision dilemma.
They're so good at this. They're so... and I hate using they because, again, it's like, who is they? But I have seen this tactic used over and over and over again. And I do feel like once you study this and look at it and read it and understand it, it must be hard for somebody like you not to just see it everywhere. I mean, I think James Lindsay runs into the same thing, is once you know the playbook kind of inside out and study it, you're like, no, this is the playbook.
Yes.
It's not just happening organically, even though it does look that way.
Organically. Hold that thought, because we're going to get to that in a second. So, design your action so that your target is focused to make a decision and all their available options play to your advantage. If you design your action well, you can force your target into a situation where they have no good options, where they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. This is a decision dilemma. When done skillfully, decision dilemmas can help win major concessions from powerful targets. So the goal is to put you in a situation where you have no good options. So this is actually an older version of it. If you look here, here's an older one. The first strategy is that targets a decision dilemma. Who's this? That used to be the website, and it's a picture of Cindy Sheehan. Who is Cindy Sheehan? Do you remember? That was the woman who had her son killed in Iraq.
Oh.
And she put W. Bush in a decision dilemma by, I'm just going to sit outside his ranch. And if he comes and talks to me, I get to beat up on him. And if he doesn't come and talk to me, he looks like he's ignoring a Gold Star mom. And that was their example of a decision dilemma. Now, this has been updated. Is this like a case study of somebody that they did this with? Or is this just somebody who did this and they're using it as an example? They used that as an example, right? So if you design your action well, yada, 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 consider the blockade of a building. A defective blockade leaves your target with only 2 options: negotiate with you and meet your demands, or react with force. That's a decision dilemma. Don't let your target walk out the back door.
This is evergreen.
Right? Yeah. So, Gandhi's 1930s protest, so this is the update. That one I just read you, that was the old version. Gandhi's 1930 represented the British authorities with a classic decision dilemma: either beat up and arrest Gandhi and his supporters and turn them into martyrs, or let them march into the sea in open defiance of British authority and the hated SALT Act. Okay? Many actions with concrete goals require decision dilemma in order to be successful. A sit-in under corporate HQ should leave your target with only two options. If they're not willing to meet your demands, they should either have to evict you forcibly and face negative public attention, or wait you ate, allowing you to gather more attention and support while business as usual grinds to a halt. Okay?
See,
Again.
I feel like they've really got nothing on Hamas.
Well,
Like-
hold on.
I just keep thinking about what?
What do you mean they have nothing on Hamas?
Like Hamas takes these tactics and then because they have absolutely really no value for life, they don't seem to care. They're willing to sacrifice lives in order to, to the there is more of the ability. They have a better ability to just be careless with life, that they can take these ideas and apply them in ways that are even more effective.
In some ways, that is correct. Which brings us to the real action is your target's reaction. When challenging a more powerful target, the key success often isn't what you do, but how your target reacts to what you do. Therefore, anticipate your target's response and write it into your script. Okay?
Yeah.
Organize
this was someone I was talking to. I was talking to a woman who follows like the terrorists and whatnot, and they were saying they just started listening to exactly what terrorist organizations were saying in Arabic, because they were very clear about what they were doing, and they were kind of listening to like the Western world talk about this, and when they were very clear about what their goals were and what they were doing and how they fully intended on antagonizing for a reaction that they predicted from the West. It was like in Die Hard, where they're like, I give you the FBI, it's just.
And this is, that's the tactic. I'm going to skip ahead and jump back. That's that tactic. Consider your audience, right? Mm-hmm. Don't expect your audience to choose you. Instead, identify the constituencies you need to win your campaign and strategically design your actions to move them in the right direction.
Right.
Okay. Remember, there is no right audience, just the audience that is right for your particular goals. Try this basic formula. We can get A to do B if they believe C. A is your audience, B is your objective, and C is your message. Design your actions towards getting A to believe C. Okay? Your core tactics and actions aren't explicitly and strategically designed to get the desired impact on your target audience. You're not being strategic. So, now, going back to the real target is your action is your target's reaction. Organizer Saul Alinsky later coined the term political jujitsu to describe actions like this. Confrontations like the Salt March, that was one of Gandhi's tactics, enable under-resourced activist groups to use powerful opponent momentum against them by provoking a reaction and then watching them fall flat in front of the cameras. A good way to ensure you get a strategically useful reaction from your target is to force them into a decision dilemma, where all the available options play to your advantage. When applying this principle, it's important to understand that you can't just hope the target reacts in a way that spotlights the injustice. You want to anticipate your target's likely reactions and design your action to provoke the reaction you want, then incorporate it. If it doesn't work the first time, just try again. So it's deliberate. Okay. Then, escalate strategically. Since a target rarely gives in after one action, it's often necessary to strategically escalate the pressure on them in a step-by-step escalation that draws on a diverse mix of tactics.
Jesus Christ, it's so...
The next that's the next one. Now the next one after that is, anger works best when you have the moral high ground. Anger is a powerful emotion. Use it wisely. If you have the moral high ground and act with dignity, anger is compelling and people will join you. If you don't, you seem a little crazy or even scary. You seem a little scary or even crazy. Okay? You should never come off as mad for the sake of being mad, but rather as reluctantly, genuinely angry in the face of outrageous circumstances.
It's so interesting, that language. You should never come off as being mad for the sake of being mad. It's still implying that it's all a performance.
Yep. Because that's why it said, remember it said consider your audience, right? That's what we're doing. We're considering our audience. Okay? And alongside considering our audience, after we have anger works best, right? It's play to the audience that isn't there. In a media-saturated world, the audience you care about is rarely the one witnessing your action, but rather the one you'll reach through mass media and social media. Design your action with them in mind. When you're pulling off a prank or staging some media spectacle, it's important to keep in mind that those you're directly confronting are often not your main audience. When Occupy Wall Street activists swarm Manhattan's financial districts, or Buffalo activists come out on the lawn of the CEO of Union Carbide, there's no reason to think that the immediate audience will change their minds based on what they're doing. Rather, the idea is to use the immediate audience as unwitting actors in a theater piece being performed for a secondary audience. That secondary audience consists of filmgoers or YouTube viewers or TV watchers or press release readers, and they're the ones you care most about. Design your intervention with them in mind.
Wow.
So after you're done that, you're going to, next tactic, do the media's work for them. Entice journalists to cover your issue by providing them with print and video materials that do half their job for them while giving you more control over the story you're trying to create. So...
Or
Don
better
Lemon,
yet, just turn all journalists into activists.
Don Lemon at that protest?
Yeah.
They fed him a script and said, come up and film. And Don Lemon shows up and just films. Don Lemon doesn't need to be involved. He just needs to be there and have this script done for him. And he goes, oh, great. Story's written for me.
Yeah.
If you want media coverage of your event, give them a story they can't refuse, one that makes your point very clearly with great visuals and a lot of humor. Make the journalist's job as simple as possible. Provide them with what they need, a concise press release, a photo with clear permissions, or a good video news release replete with the facts, figures, and sound bites that illustrate your point.
They're failing on the humor front.
It's imperative to document your action yourself and make your photos and footage available. The glitter bombing of Newt Gingrich wouldn't have gone viral if there hadn't been an accomplice videotaping it.
I mean, that's what, in Renee Good's case, her girlfriend was doing when she was driving that car. She was the videotaper.
The epigraph in the book, the epigraph in the book reads, don't hate the media, become the media. Lead with sympathetic characters, and the picture is like two cute kittens. It says, good actions tell a good story. Good stories revolve around sympathetic characters. The most sympathetic characters are the members of the impacted community that outsiders can easily relate to. Assembling a compelling cast of characters is a critical strategic consideration for any action designer. Actions tend to be strong on identifying and vilifying the antagonists for the narrative. But an audience will care much more about injustice if they can relate to the people affected. Successful actions are those that present strong protagonists and other sympathetic characters. Okay? Power holders understand the importance of deploying sympathetic characters. For instance, welfare cuts get presented as benefiting working mothers, and corporate taxes are sold as job creation tools to help the unemployed. Time and time again, the powerful play one group of sympathetic characters against another. Okay? In these cases, a campaign becomes a contest over who gets to speak for those suffering. With whom do we sympathize, and whose characters are actually given the space to speak for themselves? A showdown results between messengers jockeying to represent themselves as the authentic representative of the impacted constituencies. It's important to ensure that the faces of the action are not just representative of the relevant impacted community, but are also easily recognizable to outsiders as key characters in the story. The next lesson is, don't dress like a protester. If you look like a stereotypical protester, it's easy for people to write you off. But if you look like the girl next door, people might just sympathize with you instead. Okay? The example for this is... well, they don't have it here. But at the top is... there's these airline pilots. And so the airline pilots walk into a demonstration on Wall Street as part of an ongoing labor dispute in September 27th of 2011. Okay, so they're availing themselves of the prestige of the airline pilots, all in uniform, right?
Yeah.
You can't dismiss those people. And then finally, use your radical fringe to shift the Overton window. By strategically pushing the far edge of what is considered acceptable within a range of policy positions, you slide public opinion in your direction, making what was once fringe seem like common sense.
Mm.
There are two ways to do this. The long, hard way and the short, easy way. The long, hard way is to continue making your actual case persistently and persuasively until your position becomes more politically mainstream. By contrast, the short, easy way is to amplify and echo the voices of those who take a position more radical than what you really want. For example, if you actually want a public healthcare option in the United States, coordinate and promote those pushing for single-payer, universal healthcare. If the single-payer approach constitutes the acceptable left flank of the discourse, then the public option looks, by comparison, like the conservative option. Okay?
Wait, can you explain that again?
If what you actually want is a public option in the United States, coordinate and promote those pushing for single-payer universal healthcare. If the single-payer healthcare constitutes the acceptable left flank, the public option looks like the conservative option.
Right.
So,
got it.
Do you see how that functions? We're going to elevate our bomb throwers in order to make ourselves look reasonable.
Yeah, I feel like they also do this in the other direction. Like they'll elevate somebody like Nick Fuentes to make that also look like the mainstream conservative.
Right. So what's happening is they elevate their extremists to make themselves look reasonable. And then we're the reasonable left. We're not those extremists over there that we've elevated intentionally. And then the people on the other side, when they elevate extremists on the other side, they can paint those people as, crazy. We're just sensible centrists now, right?
Yeah.
Think of how cynical that is.
It's very cynical. I mean, even the language is cynical. Just the idea that nobody really is don't actually be mad at these injustices. Just make sure that you're using the anger that you're presenting or performing effectively so that you can grab power.
Yes, that's right. That's right. What you're seeing here is the utter cynicism of it. Nothing is actually done in a way that is meant to actually engage with the substance. It's meant to hijack and control the discourse to get what you actually are after. So all of their takes are not meant to actually convince you. The arguments they make are selected not on their truth basis or on what is actually believed, but rather for the effect that they have on the discourse and the way that they can manipulate the discourse to make certain people look more or less reasonable. So each hot take is how do I put this? What they say is not meant to persuade for truth and is not selected on a truth basis. It's selected for its role and the function it can play in a strategic manipulation of the discourse.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share one more because this is also important. This is going to turn out to matter quite a lot, actually. So talking about tactics, David Graeber explained in 2000 that protesters at the Summit of the Americas had green and yellow and red zones of protest. Each color represented a level of violence allowed. Green was nonviolence, yellow was obstructive, and red was disruptive. Just so we're clear, obstructive is a euphemism for blocking road entrances and so forth, and disruptive is a euphemism for the use of violence and property damage to shut things down. The sophisticated use of pre-planned violence goes back a long way, and then I go to explain it. But direct action is an ethnography by David Graeber, and he's quite clear about exactly what he's doing, right? And if you read him, he says right here, there's an interview. A woman from the CASA, who I was called Celine, began by summarizing the information already printed. Color blocks are not fixed. The green block is the more artistic, free stuff. The yellow block is obstructive, and the red block is disruptive. Okay? Now, if you remember back, do you remember the Portland protesters? Do
they get assigned like colors? Like who, when they're organizing this
There's
stuff,
been
like,
a lot
all right,
of
your team
sympathetic-
red block.
Okay, no, remember, she said there were certain zones where certain things were going to happen. Okay, so back in the day where was it? Right, so this is 2020. You want to know how activists in places like Portland take over roads, smash buildings, and get the press to call them nonviolent? Well-trained activists using intelligent tactics. So I go through, I show how there's a thread here about how the shields were made. Okay, put your target in a decision dilemma. The real action is your target's reaction, right? As we're scrolling through here, play to the audience that isn't there. Do the media's work for them. Then there's the wall of moms, right?
Green zone.
So you have, on the one hand, you have people making shields. It takes about 3 hours, and it talks about how the shields get made. So the shields were built by people in a garage. An assembly line of over 25 volunteers gathered to help put them together. Each shield takes about 3 hours to make. All the materials is donated. And the volunteers have made about 250 shields and build between 30 and 55 per session. And a lot of them are made by like taking those large plastic barrels, and you cut them in half or quarter them, and then you put foam on them, and then you put a sign on front. So it looks like a sign, but it's a shield that protects you, right? And there's a thread here that's talking about exactly how that works, exactly how that's put together, right? So they have that there, and then they have a wall of moms. And why do they have a wall of moms? Because they're leading with sympathetic characters, okay?
Right.
Alex Hunter in Rabble wrote about a diversity of tactics and talks about the importance of not having a dogmatic commitment to nonviolence, right? So what ends up happening is you end up with the wall of moms on the one hand, which are your sympathetic characters. That's how you do the media's work for them, and you give those people the press release. And then, you leave a U-Haul with a bunch of shields in it for protesters to find later somewhere else, and they're the ones who do the violence.
Right.
Right? That's how they're able to do a lot of this stuff, is they split the protest up. Now you're saying, well, who's doing this? Well, that depends. Yes. A lot of these organizers are doing it behind the scenes. There was a U-Haul that was left with a bunch of shields. They just drive the U-Haul, or they just leave a pallet of bricks out. And it's just understood that certain people will be allowed, or that certain people will take those shields and they'll do one thing and they'll engage in disruptive behavior and protect themselves from police. The manuals on de-arresting people, right? The police arrest somebody, 40 people jump on top and start, so the police can't run, and then everyone runs, and, all of this stuff happens, and de-arresting occurs and all the rest of it. But it's all planned. Like, these people are trained to do this. And who does this? There's activists, there's organizations, there's NGOs, all of whom train on this stuff.
And it's all decentralized.
Nobody's in charge. There's a few people who are in charge of a particular protest, but nobody runs the whole movement. Right. There's heavies, there's movers and shakers in the movement who kind of have sort of credibility that goes before them wherever they go. Like if Bill Ayers or somebody like that, or Angela Davis shows up at a rally, she's going to be listened to. But in terms of the organizers, it's all collaborative, and most of them are people who have been doing this for like 20 years while working in the nonprofit sector.
Right.
Or working at the Women's Center at your local university, or working for a PIRG, a public interest research group, which is that's Ralph Nader's like university level clubs, you could think of them as. It used to be that every university had a PIRG. So there'd be OPIRG, the Ohio State Public Interest Research Group, and there'd be the Harvard Public Interest Research Group. And all of these PIRGs would be organized on campus, and they would have activists that work there. There are activists who work in NGOs, in nonprofits, in charity work, a lot of them, social work, the helping professions. I'm a nurse and I'm an activist. Like, that's the most common thing in the world, right? And they're trained by people who just do this. They'll hold activism camps where they actually will. Yeah, here it is. Activist training with beautiful
like
trouble.
Jihad training.
You think I'm joking, man, but
no, it sounds like it. It sounds like the jihads, like when they're doing their little, monkey bars and stuff.
Yeah, here it is.
I believe that it occurs.
Yeah, I'm generating momentum activist training with Beautiful Trouble. Dave Mitchell, the co-editor, our annual activist leadership training camp provided a copy of Beautiful Trouble to every participant, and it instantly became an invaluable and training resource. Used as a reference point in many workshops, the book advanced the goal of the camp to empower youth by giving them concepts and skills necessary to take action on issues they're passionate about. And then there's the people that are all there training. They didn't know I was one of them, but I was at that university when that was going on. And so they have a creative activism group activity where they have a tactic and how to do it too. Then there's a scenario. And then there's a new scenario. A private consortium with support from the leadership of a nearby First Nation have announced the construction of a nuclear waste storage facility. A broad coalition of individuals and environmental have vowed to stop the project from going ahead. The project is scheduled to break ground in 3 months. The assignment, design an action that contributes to a broader campaign that's to stop the nuclear waste storage facility from going ahead.
Wow.
They are actually legitimately putting people through training for real life situations when they can take this stuff and implement it. And all of these organizers, there's hundreds of them, probably tens of thousands of them, and they just, every little action you see has a person doing that, and it's decentralized. That's why it's a swarm. It's also why you see this stuff showing up in Minnesota, because Minnesota is full of these people, right?
Yeah.
It's a very, very homogeneous, white, upper class, educated place, which is chock full of humanities graduates who have been trained in this stuff. So of course,
the first
Minnesota.
protest I was writing about this. The first protest I ever went to was in Minnesota, and it was for Amadou Diallo. What is his name? He was in jail. He was like a big figure.
Diallo. Yep.
Diallo. Yeah. Yep.
I know.
What is your? Thank you for taking us through that. I do want to do a YouTube video where we do the same thing and walk people through it, just so. Most importantly, they can say, we can reference things that have happened within the last, 10, 15 years so that people can start recognizing it when they see it. Yeah. Because I think for the average person, it feels very organic, which was something you kind of wanted me to put a pin in. And maybe we can end on that note.
Yeah. The organic, that was the final two tactics. Don't dress like a protester. They want it to feel like it's organic.
Like you just got off work and you stopped this protest.
That's what they wanted everyone to think about Renee Good. She was just a mother on her way from work who happened to be in an Antifa group with information about how to de-arrest people. Wow.
And a signal chat with a list of all the...
I can't believe they shot Alex Peretti. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go into, someone made a tweet about this. I'm going to go into an operating room and bang pots and pans and shine laser pens in the surgeon's eyes. And then when he screws up, I'm going to use that as an excuse to say no one should have healthcare anymore.
Yeah.
Right? What you're doing is you're intentionally creating an environment where the police can't do their jobs. And then if they overreact, you say, aha! Right? And then you use he shouldn't have stood in front of the police. Well, people are like, I don't like that she got shot. And I don't like that the police created such a chaotic environment. No. The police didn't create a chaotic environment. That chaotic environment was created by those people who meant to create a chaotic environment. They just weren't banking on anyone actually pulling the trigger.
Right. Or maybe
like the second guy who got shot, everyone was like, he's just a nurse. Except for that after a couple of weeks, here's him kicking out a police car's lights. Oh, that guy's a known agitator. And so when police come across a guy who's a known agitator with a gun, the odds that someone gets shot skyrocket dramatically. Now, that's not to say the shootings in either case are justified, but it is to say that they wanted to create a situation where something bad would happen, hoping the police would break. And here's the decision dilemma. If the police don't give in and something goes wrong, it's going to be blamed on the police, whether it's their fault or not. In this case, both shootings may be bad. Like it might be that neither shooting is justified. Right. But the point is that they want to get it right to the edge, but not across. That's what they're doing. And it's intentional. It's intentional. It's absolutely, I'm not touching you. Mm-hmm. Right? I didn't technically touch you. I'm not touching you. Right? That's what they're doing. And it's so hard to put a name to because there's no single person making rules with a goal and a concrete action. It's just a swarm of like people who all look, and you can't tell who's the operatives and who's not. You're just swarmed by them. And that's the point.
When I was in 2020, when we were watching the live video of all of the downtown, like the riots going on all over LA, we sat there and watched that for 12 hours, and you could, after a while, start, because they were just running the tape and the people would be standing there reporting, and in the background you would see every time someone dressed in all black, completely head to toe, clearly a white person. You could usually see a little of their skin, but it was like someone head to toe and all black, breaks the windows, and then it would be swarmed with like the people who would just loot the stores.
Yep.
And
how do you
always
deal with
there
a
was
swarm?
one person. I'm like, look, there's that dude, and it's like the same dude just breaking windows. One person, and then they're gone, and then everybody else just looting.
I have another thread on that. I won't get into it now because you got to go. But I have another thread where I talk about how they do that. Here's them bringing hammers. Here's how they smash windows. Here's the level of property damage they think they can get away with before police get involved. Like they set targets for all of this, and none of it is done by accident. Now, obviously, once a full-blown riot gets going, people do things and stuff goes crazy.
Yeah, it's out of your hands.
But there is a certain amount of like before the protests get out of hand, as long as the protests are on the edge of rowdy but not, it's all intentional. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. What's your biggest defect of character?
Mine?
Very quick. Mm-hmm.
I'm socially inept at times.
What's your biggest asset?
I'm socially inept at times. It allows me to not care. It allows me to just say, I don't care. Like, I'm offended. Okay. And right? Like that gets me into trouble from time to time. But the reason I'm able to do what I'm doing, the reason that I haven't been taken over in part by this is because the social tactics that they use and that they leverage against people don't work against a guy like me.
And where can we find you?
Woko_distance on Twitter.
And awesome. Let's keep talking. You're the best.
We'll do a beautiful trouble for one of these.
Yes, we're gonna do it. We'll talk about how to make that a thing.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Fetisi. I'm Bridget Fetisi, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.